Hello everyone out there in YouTube land. Just a quick tutorial on how to get more painterly looks for your Artrage stuff. So here I've got layer 1 and layer 2. Going to sketch in a quick couple of mountains here and just kind of show you my process that I use for making mountains that makes it a little bit easier. So just kind of free forming it here, and I'm going to sketch in one here and then another one over here as well. And these are just generic mountain forms, so I'm not doing anything crazy. But I just kind of want you to get a feel for what it looks like and everything else. So I've got a background here and I'm tracing over top of it and going to put in a few indicators for highlights and shadows. Excuse me. So what I'm doing here is, again, just kind of getting a rough shape, not trying to go for anything crazy, but I just kind of want to show you a new technique that I'm trying out and kind of walk you through it. So what I'm doing is just trying to play around with where I want the highlights, where I want the shadows. And so I started sketching it in here, but I think actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to the selection tool so I can play around with just throwing in some really quick colors. So let me get some of this stuff out of your way and go to the freehand selection tool, which is very similar to Photoshop if you're used to that. And just want to kind of sketch in some just rough shapes here. Again, I'm not trying for anything spectacular, just more of a concept, a little bit of concept art with it. So let me do that here real quick. So give me just a second to kind of do this in. Now, if you're sketching this in, the way you can add more to it, like I'm doing here, is just hold down the Shift key when you start the next one, and it will start a whole new selection. So that way you can add to your selections and just play around with it. All right, so let's get a little bit of a color here. And just kind of brush in some real quick strokes for a highlight color with some white. Now I have my brush set to dry clumps that you can see here, and what I'm doing is just real quickly brushing them in. I like it because it gives a more painterly feel using the dry clumps, and it really kind of helps you get that kind of like oil painting feeling or acrylic. So but I'm gonna do this side. This mountain is going to be kind of a snowy mountain kind of a feel, and then the other one I think I'm going to do with more like a, I don't know, summertime or just a different season other than snow kind of feel to it. So I'm trying to get more of a painterly look and more of a classical look and less digital in my paintings on Artrage, because I want them to reflect how I do everything in traditional paints. So that's what I'm working on here. But one of the nice things about working in something like Artrage is that you have the ability to really play around with colors and not waste paint and not waste time. So it's great to do these practice pieces like this, where you just kind of go in, you throw in some highlights, some shadows, kind of give yourself an idea of what direction the sunlight's coming from. And then from there, once we have the base tones down, we'll start playing around with more of textures and more of the feel of it and everything. So, and with different colors and so forth. So just trying to really break it up and not repeat the exact same mountain on the right side, but just instead give you a good feel for the way it looks. So again, lasso tool, selection tool, freehand, shift lets you grab extra stuff. And then this one I'm going to go with more of a almost a peachy tan kind of color, and again brushing it in just like I was doing before. And that's all I'm doing here is I'm just practicing and letting this blue be my background and just kind of keep practicing. I'm using a stylus to do this. You can do this actually with a mouse, but right now I'm just using a stylus to lay in the color so I can have a little bit of variation in pressure. This isn't sped up at all either. I know some videos I put out and some videos other people put out, they speed it up. to try and break up the I guess the monotony of the painting. But I wanted to show you real time how you can sit here and just kind of play around and get some stuff kicked out that looks pretty decent. And do all that. So this is completely real time. I've painted it before recording this voiceover, just because honestly with my household it's easier to do that. So what I'm doing here is I'm opening up stencils and getting that. So that way, sorry about the little pop up there. I made a stone stencil, and what I did here was went outside, took a photo of a stone, and then turned it into a stencil so that I can get the textures. And it's a great way to play around and mix and match the texture for it and get that, instead of having to sit there trying to recreate it, I can use it to create the look and feel that I want really quick. So control allows me to resize it. So just holding control and moving the mouse, it allows me to resize it. Alt allows me to turn it like I'm doing now. And then space allows me just to move it, period. So now that I've got the blue, so I'm going to go back and the whitish color there. So I'm going to grab a little bit of a different color to go on top to start really playing around with some highlights and texture. So the first color I put down on both of these is really just kind of a mid-tone to give me an idea of what direction I want light coming from. And then I'm going to go in here and start laying it down on, and then I'll go back and start adding some shadows. And again, I've got the oil brush set to dry clumps. Okay, so now I'm throwing in a little bit of shadow. And really, so for this part right through here, what I'm doing is just, I'm going to start playing back and forth in shadow, back and forth in highlight to really get a good feel of texture and layer upon layer of the texture that I want it to, the final piece to have. And again, these are just practice. So, you know, the best way to get good at this is just practice over and over and over and over on it. So. Again, move it across, take a look. Grab something a little bit darker to make some deeper shadows. So as you can see, it's starting to build up the textures for what I'm wanting. So now I'm going to rotate my stencil. And that's the nice thing about these stencils. You know, if you make your own, you can really play around with the texture. Just from one stencil, you can get a lot of different looks just by moving it, resizing it, re-angling it, and doing all that. So now I just want to lay in where some of the deeper shadows are. So just kind of keep playing around with it, move it around, take a look. But you can see how it's starting to get that that look that you can see that you can get with a palette knife for oils, you know, kind of like what Bob Ross or Jerry Arnell or any of those guys get. But I'm really wanting to get just more texture added in with it. So that's what I'm doing here, is just push, pull, check it, push, pull, check it, and see what textures I'm doing. Because it's, you know, really, when you think about it, when you're painting, you're not trying to be a camera. You're trying to really be an impressionist and trick the eye and give it the impression of a mountain that's sitting there. And for me, I'm trying to move more and more towards that, and more and more towards the getting the ideas across, like something like you would see with like N.C. Wyeth or somebody else along those lines, like the older illustrators. So now I just want to take the brush and put in some more highlights. And the easiest way to do this is to move the stencil and just kind of look for the areas that look like a natural highlight should be there. because remember my sunlight or my light source is coming from the left. So I'm looking for that, that clear cut highlight, and really can pull out some of those edges. But by using the paint daubs setting for the oil brush, it gives you that dry brush kind of a feel like you get with acrylics. And it really plays well with this texture, because if you're going across with it, remember the paint runs out on the brush as you're moving around. So now what I did here was I switched to the ink pen because I wanted a smoother, more distinct line than what I was getting with the oil brush to really make some of those areas pop and just make some of them show up a little bit more. So again, playing with textures, looking for a smoother texture, a rougher texture, a highlight, a darker dark. Move the stencil back over and get some more of those pushed in. So that way I can really see what it looks like and can bring the mountain over this way or down that way and constantly play around. But if you haven't made these stencils and you want to know how, leave a comment down below that, something just as simple as show stencils. And then I'll be happy to show you how to make these. And if you haven't joined my Facebook group, I have a private group on Facebook that I'll put a link to below. Make sure and join it. I'll share out some of these stencils in there so that way you can use these, and it'd be a great resource for us all to share back and forth with each other to start taking our artwork to the higher level. But here you can see I'm just pushing in more of the dark tones for the shadows to really make the lights pop. So if you're doing something like a mountain like I'm doing here, what is your biggest struggle? Is it breaking up the space? Is it getting the texture? Is it perspective? What is it? What's your biggest struggle with this? What would you like me to cover more of for something like this for a landscape? Leave a comment below. Tell me what you would like to do. Come over to the Facebook group and jump in there. We have several people in there now, and it's just starting out. It's growing, but we'd love to have you over there. We can, again, share ideas, share techniques, kind of get a feel for what everybody's doing, and really make sure that we're helping each other go to the next level for all of our techniques and designs and everything else. So, but what's your biggest struggle? What do you have the most trouble doing, or wish that you knew how to do with any of these kind of techniques? So leave a comment below. Let me know, and that way I can try and maybe cover it in the next one that I'm doing. And again, I'm hoping to get these up more often. It's hard for me to record the audio for it because I have a dog that just likes to go crazy at the slightest sound, and so it's hard for me to be recording it and not have the dog barking. She's a beautiful, sweet baby, but she is very loud at the slightest thing. So she's got a big booming bark. But if you don't mind, would you mind videos that didn't have me talking, that just had me showing the technique? Is that okay? If so, then I can get those up faster. Let me know. Let me know which ones you prefer. If you prefer me sitting here talking, would you prefer me talking live as I do it, or going back and doing a voiceover, kind of like what I'm doing now? I'm here to help, so I want to help however I can. So just let me know. So what I'm doing here is I've got the palette knife, and I'm just smearing out the bottom of it to kind of blend it down. And it'll eventually I'll move it to kind of a misty look like you would see in a lot of those PBS paintings and stuff with like Bob Ross and stuff, where they kind of fade it down into the mountain mist and stuff, which if used right can really give you a nice sense of depth. I do have some loading on my palette knife, so that's why you see me clicking every now and then where the color changes. That's me holding down Alt and picking up the color. and then smearing it on top of what I've already done. It gives you some really nice blends that way. See, you can really kind of like right there, I'm adding some highlights just by smearing it in with the palette knife. Very similar to how I would do it if it was oils or acrylics. I would do pretty much the similar thing. All right, so kind of getting close to having this one done, and then I'm gonna switch over to the other mountain. So I want to kind of fade out and blur out the bottom here, so it kind of fades into the distance. You know, and that's the great thing too. I mean, whether you like people like Bob Ross or Bill Alexander and all that kind of stuff, you know, one of the tricks they do really well is stuff like this, where they add in the out of focus or fuzzy area to pull your eye up to an area like the top of the mountain, so that becomes your focal point. So now I just want to put in some mist here, so I've got the airbrush tool. I'll just kind of float some clouds in here real quick. Using the old big and subtle. When you're doing something like this, you want to grab some of the color from the mountain itself so that there's a harmony in the colors. Yeah. And then you can also grab you know, some of the shadows if you want the shadow to carry across the mountain to the other areas and see that as well. So that's kind of what I'm doing here. So all right, so you can see, you know, not too bad. In 10, 15 minutes, got a nice little mountain range over here for that side. And you know, you can sit here and pitter and putter around with it as much as you want to really play around with it. So I think I'm going to switch over to the other one and start on it. So, and you know, the nice thing too is once you start really practicing with these things, it becomes faster. You know, you'll start doing it. You'll see that I'm going to do this one in about probably half the time it took me to do the one on the left. Just so I can, because I've got a feel for it. I've got a feel for the technique now. I got a feel for what I'm doing with it. And that's why you want to practice and make sure that you really have down exactly what you want to do. So that way when I go to do the next one, it's just like, oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. So here I've got the pressure 54, the loading at 0, and that just allows me to really kind of scrape the paint. But I'm going to increase the loading to about half, a little over half here, so I can kind of squish in some of the color. Like I said, this is where, so I look at a lot of Tim Hildebrandt, a lot of N.C. Wyeth, and their stuff. So I noticed one of the things is that when they're building up mountains, they very much have a orange tan color for the highlights and a purplish color for the shadows. So that's kind of what I wanted to go for here, is to kind of get that feel for it, where you can play around with those colors. So it looks really kind of weird at the moment to just have the purple and peachy tan color there, but it does start to come together. And again, by doing the other one first, I have a real good feel for the technique and a real good feel for how I want to lay it out. So it just gives me a chance to relax, block in some colors, and then from there start really playing around with the textures and everything else. So I got the shadows blocked in. I'm going to go back and block in some more highlights. And the nice thing about going back and forth, you can see where it kind of starts giving the overlap with the texture from the tan and stuff. So now bring the stencil back over and give it a little twist, kind of figure out, okay, where do I want some texture at, adjust it, and then again, start looking for those places I can add highlights. Still using the oil brush with dry clumps. So even shadows have highlights, and you want to always go back in and add some lighter tones to break up the darker. Because by doing so, you can see it really starts to give it more depth. So that's what I'm doing here, is breaking up the shadow to make it look like some of the light's kind of coming across from the tan parts, and then see, it starts to really give you that hint of shadow. And like I did before, you're just pushing and pulling the texture, pushing and pulling the texture. Rotate that around, break up the pattern, and start going back in and adding some darks. But this is the fun part when you're doing these, is it gives you a chance to really play around with some colors that you wouldn't think of doing. I mean, how many of you would have jumped right in with a purple for the shadow, versus a blue or a gray or something? But you can see right now I've got some of the colors, so I'm going to go in just like I did with the one on the left. I'm going to add some cracks here and there. I'm going to some darker areas. By moving the stencil around, I want to be able to look and see, where are my highlights, where are my shadows, where are my valleys. And that's kind of what I'm looking at right now. It's like, okay, if there was a valley here, where would that go dark at? Where would this come down through here at? Where can I add in a really deeper spot and make that other color pop? It's just a matter of tweaking and playing around with it. And this is the part where you can take something like this really orangish color, this orange peach color right here, and just make those pop off that more subtle tones. So you can. This I'm going to pull back a little bit because I need more of a mid-tone. The other one's a little bright, so I want to push it back a little bit. And I can do that by just going back over it with this darker color here. Again, move the stencil around, get a little bit of texture, move it around again, get a little different texture. So what do you guys think? Was this something that you would have done? Is this how you would have done it? Is this helpful? So here's the peachy color I was looking at before. Now, by having it set up this way, it's, as you can see in the color picker down there, you can see that the color is a little bit closer to the yellow end of the spectrum, which means it's going to be more of a complementary to the purple, which is going to make it pop even more. By having the complementaries there, or at least ones that are in the complementary family, it really starts to make it pop. And you can almost see this in a mountain scene that's in the desert, or some non-wintry area with these really steep cliffs and everything else. So again, I want to push and pull and get some different colors in there. It doesn't have to all be purples. You can throw in some blues, some blue grays like I've got here, which again makes that transition a little bit softer for the eye, like maybe some of that color is wrapping around on its own. Let's see the difference here. Just by playing around with the stencil and by playing around with the oil brush, and you get kind of a really nice look. So again, if you throw a little bit of clouds in here, and this is really just done on these two layers. It's done on the I put the blue in the background, and then so the heavy blurred frosting is probably the best for doing clouds. So that's what I'm doing here right now. but just really 2 layers. You know, I'm not jumping around with a bunch of different layers. I'm just kind of letting the colors and the paint really play and interact with each other, which is one of the things I love about Artrage. It really imitates traditional paints and gives you that same feel for it. So by blending all this down, you can see how it again brings out those crisp areas that are at the top of the mountain and pushes it back in the distance for perspective. So some atmospheric perspective. So if I wanted to, I could put more trees and other stuff here, but I'm just really going to add in some clouds and kind of, you know, call it a day. Okay. So, what are your thoughts, guys? What do you think about this? Do you see the differences by playing around with the colors, by playing around with the stencil, how you can really get a nice texture in there, and get a real classical look, traditional paint look with it? Are you going to try this out? Is this something that you found interesting that you want to go try with Artrage? Um, Remember, I'm not an affiliate with Artrage at all. Wish I was. Maybe someday I can get them to sponsor one of these, but I'm not. So, but you know, you can get it for free and try it out, and you don't have to pay for it until you actually decide you want to use it. So now I've jumped to another layer, and this is because I want to have some clouds go over top of the actual mountains, and I don't want to mess with the paint underneath. So I'm just gonna dry brush in some clouds here real quick, and then I'll go back and soften them with the palette knife. Now you notice how on the winter one, I stuck with more of a white look. On the summertime one, the other season one, I grabbed a light beige from the highlights of the rock. That way it'll all blend together when I do it. And you can really see it. So just kind of feathered in here with the palette knife. And it just kind of softens it and blends it out. And sorry for the pauses here, guys. My computer, I'd forgotten when I recorded this, my computer lagged a little bit right here at the end. It was trying to, I didn't realize it, but it was trying to run an update in the background. So if you see it stop every now and then, that's what's going on. So, but it's only a couple times that it does it, and I totally forgot about it. But again, adding in these colors, throwing a little blue on top of that peach, it kind of ties it together because I'm pulling in from what's in the mountain. Same thing with this one over here. Throw in some more colors, and then we're good to go. So here I am trying to record this. I have my cat that's trying to climb all over me and lay down. So I don't know if you can hear the purring that she's doing, but she's laying across my chest while I'm doing this. And I'm sitting up in a chair trying to record this for you guys. But she's totally laying across me diagonally, and she's a freaking hot rock. So I'm sweating as I'm sitting here recording this. So I wanted to have more of the clouds here, so I decided to go in with the ink pen and get more of a solid, and then just again brush it out. Because one of the things with the palette knife, as you're using it, it will fade out a lot of it, and so you have to kind of put down a lot of paint, if you will, to get that look. But this would be a great way to do a volcano, you know. Now I want to put some mist behind the mountains and also break up this blue to make it look a little bit more like clouds itself. So one of the things with that is just, you know, grab the layer that was below it, go really big with the pen what you think is like, oh my gosh, why would you do that? But watch. Now I'm going to switch over to the palette knife. And like I said, when you use the palette knife, it really fades it out. So you want to lay down a lot at first. But then I just keep going over it and it slowly fades it into the background. And you get a nice cloud or mist behind it. So same thing, go back over with some more heavy pen, really break it up, and then just fade it into it. It's a great way to do clouds, really easy. Normally if I was doing this with oil paints or acrylics, I'd be using like a 2-inch brush to get that look. So then again, jump back in front. So this is about it, guys. I'm wrapping it up here. Going to throw in a few more clouds. Come join me over on Facebook. Let me know what you thought here. And please, if you like this, click a like, click a thumbs up, click a subscribe, click the notification for new ones coming out. I'm trying to get more on a schedule. But let me know. Do you want more voiceovers? Do you want more just the painting by itself? If it's the painting by itself, I can get those out quicker. If you want more voiceovers, I can get those out, but I'm trying to arrange it so I can get more of a quieter space to record these things for you guys. But let me know. Whatever you need is what I'm going to provide. So this is what it looks like. So there you go. 2 mountains done with a stencil and the oil brush, and you get a really different look for both. So I hope you've enjoyed it. Leave me some comments below, some likes, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Thanks again for joining me. I truly hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope you learned something. So have a great rest of the day. Thanks.